For the last 100 years, Washington Farm Bureau has served as the voice of agriculture in Washington state. Established at the grassroots level, Farm Bureau has worked to improve the quality of life for farm and ranch families across Washington. Farm Bureau supports the values and livelihood of every member at the local, state, and national level. Established to promote, protect, and represent the economic, social, and educational interests of those in agriculture, Washington Farm Bureau has continued to grow throughout the last century. In 1919, a small group of farmers from 30 states gathered in Chicago and founded the American Farm Bureau Federation. 1 year later, Washington followed suit, establishing their own organization in 1920. Farm Bureau fought early battles to ensure rural communities enjoyed the same benefits as that of our city cousins. Early on, our members learned that their voices were stronger when they stood together, and Farm Bureau continues to ensure the voice of the local farmer is heard. The Walla Commerce Club was home to the first Washington Farm Bureau annual meeting, at which our first president, George Hayton from Chehalis, was elected. Throughout the 1920s, like-minded members were organized into commodity committees in order to develop cooperative marketing and communication efforts. This support was one of the earliest educational and support programs established by Washington Farm Bureau. By 1921, 19 county farm bureaus had been established across the state. In the 1930s, the Washington Farm Bureau Board of Directors met in Walla. Leadership elections were held in April, and an annual meeting with all active Farm Bureau participants took place in January. Walla and Spokane County Farm Bureau paved the way for member communication by publishing a monthly edition of Farm Bureau News. In April 1935, headlines read, "Farm Bureau Directors Hold Busy Season," and highlighted their interaction with American Farm Bureau policy, opposing the inclusion of the trucking industry under the jurisdiction of the Interstate Commerce Commission. During this time, an orchard that averaged 1,000 boxes of pears per acre received an average of 58 cents per box. A long-standing tradition was established in the 1930s with the creation of the local Farm Bureau's Sweetheart Pageant. 8 fairest farmerette contestants vied for the crown in 1935. The same year, a proposal for a women's division of the Farm Bureau, known as the Associated Women of the Washington State Farm Bureau Federation, was approved. But due to lack of time to complete a statewide organization, the committee was never established. In 1936, Walla Farm Bureau was recognized by the American Farm Bureau for a 21% growth in membership. A total of 1,500 new farm family members were added to the Bureau. Herbert Clark of Walla remained an active leader during the 1930s, starting as the state secretary and later serving as the president for many years. As the 1940s rolled around, Washington and Oregon Farm Bureau were close allies. Each state sent representatives to the American Farm Bureau Convention to fill their delegations. The Junior Farm Bureau program rose to the top of the Board of Directors' priorities. Each established county farm bureau was directed to appoint a boy and a girl to represent their junior membership. As a family-based organization, it was important to include the next generation. Gearing up for annual meeting, members were reminded in the 1940s edition of the Farm Bureau News of the values of the organization. A featured article read, "Farm Bureau does not offer gold bricks on a silver platter, but rather lays the hard, cold facts on the table, working together to find solutions all the way from the local to federal level." In the early 1940s, continuing to cultivate relationships with their neighbors, Washington and Oregon Farm Bureau worked closely. Both encouraged members to support the newly established Idaho Farm Bureau. In April 1940, wheat was noted in Farm Bureau News as the most valuable crop in the state, being produced on 53% of Washington's cultivated acres. During the mid to late 1940s, headlines included, "Wage stabilization probably one of the most serious problems before the farmers of the nation today." Farm Bureau was no stranger to this problem and worked to keep farming profitable. R.T. Smith of Kittitas Farm Bureau led the organization from 1943 to 1945. Membership nationwide was on the rise. Under the direction of Smith, the first obligation of Washington Farm Bureau was to support all measures necessary for winning World War II. Through his leadership, Members were encouraged to focus on the current food supply needs and establish a post-war reality of their industry. As our state leadership became more active in federal politics, Washington Farm Bureau delegations began traveling to Washington, D.C. to meet with members of Congress. The State Farm Bureau office, initially located in Walla Walla, moved to Spokane in 1947. As new county farm bureaus were established, the state annual meeting became a traveling affair to allow for more membership participation. By the 29th annual meeting in 1949, the event had found a new home in Yakima. During the 1950s, the Associated Rural Women, a subcommittee of Washington State Farm Bureau, became very active. Hosting various meetings around the state and connecting the county boards, the committee was creating a name for themselves. Consumer-producer relations was their main focus. The American Farm Bureau Convention came to the Emerald City, Seattle, in 1951. Headlines in 1953 read, "Farmer water rights are endangered," and the Washington Farm Bureau policy was focused on the protection of water use for every farmer and rancher in the nation. Washington Farm Bureau worked closely with neighboring State Farm Bureau allies and the American Farm Bureau to represent the interests of farmers everywhere. Farm Bureau boosters became active in 1955 as a special committee focused on representing the interests of all active farm and ranch families. During the 1950s, Farm Bureau was recognized as the world's largest farm group. An official membership campaign was launched in 1955 and again in 1960. With many young men being pulled away from the farm to fight in the Vietnam War, preparing the next generation of Farm Bureau leaders was important to the success of the organization.
Well, from 1974, I inherited the job, late 73 actually. I was vice president, moved up to president on the death of Ray DeVries. We had a big meeting and said, we think we should bring Farm Bureau to the county. And it was interesting. There were some folks there that were pretty adamant that, oh no, we have organizations here, we don't need another one. And we said, well, one guy got up we didn't know what his background was or how he felt really, till he stood up and he said, from what I've heard of this organization, I want to be the first member. We only had 19 members for a while. It didn't sound like much, but in the wheat country, that was a nucleus. We had kind of some from every town in the county. There are 5 major towns, and we got somebody from every town, and we started growing. Well, our saying in our time even was, Farm Bureau doesn't cost, it pays. And being able to talk as a wheat grower to a corn grower or a hog farmer or whatever, it just, you could kind of compare notes and say, where do we go from here and what can improve it? Before we'd go sit on our tractor and complain. So, and that's not the voice we wanted to be public. Within the organization, one of the fun things, and it really paid off I think in the long run, was starting the Young Farmer Program. That started at that time. And a couple of the guys that we recruited were guys like Steve Apple and Dean Farnes. and I think most folks in Farm Bureau in the last 20 years probably know who those guys are. In this world, politics is a huge thing, and understanding each other. And he worked that direction for many years, and I think it's paid for all of us. I think he's been helpful to the organization as well as to the farmers in general. When I was the president, I think we had 3,800 members. We thought we were doing well. We gained 500 that year or something. And now we look out and I don't know what the exact figure is, over 40,000 anyway. Mm-hmm. And so we've got an easier route to talk to folks. We were talking to ourselves with that 3,800. That was probably 95% farmers. Mm-hmm. And now we've got the associates, and I think that's good. A group that needs to tell a story, but people are always hungry. Mm-hmm. They always need to eat. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to fill that need. Mm-hmm. My religion is probably the top thing in my life, but Farm Bureau comes a close second because we need both to tell a story. Yeah. And So I don't know. 100 years is a long time. I mean, we look back. I guess I've been in Farm Bureau for 60 of its 100 years, so I'm supposed to know these things, right? But it's been a good ride. You know, nothing's perfect, but we keep trying, and I think that's probably where it'll be 100 years from now.
Born on a farm. After school, I worked for Dad. He was in the dairy business, and I always liked the farm. I worked for my dad for a few years, and then took over the business when he retired, and went on from there. There was some good times and some not so good times, but we always made it. I learned a lot from my dad in that respect because he went through the Depression, and I'm always impressed with what he accomplished despite how tough it was. And so he was very conservative, and what I learned from him is that worked well for me. So the interesting thing that I got involved in Farm Bureau because of a Farm Bureau insurance agent. As I was trying to sell insurance, and I didn't know anything about Farm Bureau. And that's what got me started. I can remember the subsidies back when the Second World War, they wanted us to produce all we could produce. And they bought all the butter that we could make. And then they had to give it away afterwards, you know. So then those subsidies became a problem. What are we going to do with them? So they basically kind of paid you not to produce it. You know, they give you a little decent price of milk in one way or another, so that you didn't have to worry about producing more and more to stay in the business. If you want to stay in the business, you've got to grow with the economy. And whether there's a subsidy or not, you have to grow with it, or you're not going to make it. That's what it amounts to. And I don't think the average customer here, consumer, understands that. You know, I can remember going to meetings at Olympia, and I can remember one for a particular case. We were having it was in Olympia, and the farmers were there, and congressmen were there, and they were having this discussion. And the farmers would get up and make a statement, and there was consumers there. And this one lady was very negative. We just thought we were getting way too much in the way of subsidies and price of milk and so on and so forth. And I remember this one dairyman stood up and he says, "Ma'am, if you were in the business and you drove us out of business, drove you out of business, what would you do?" "Well, I'd go to the grocery store and get my milk." That just blew us away. I think agriculture is in better shape now than it was during those years that I grew up in, because we didn't have the wherewithal to do anything about it. But now we're organized.
I joined Washington Farm Bureau about 1970 or the early 70s. I don't remember the exact year. See, back then we had local farm bureaus in every community. The two gentlemen that approached me and got me to join made me a member of the Grandview unit. Almost every valley town in Yakima County had a local farm bureau unit. And a gentleman by the name of Jack Baird and a gentleman by the I can't remember the other gentleman's name. I had another farm up the road along with this, and I was up there working, and they stopped one day and wanted to know if they could talk to me, and I said, "What's on your mind?" "Well, we'd like you to join Farm Bureau." I said, "What's it about?" And they explained it to me, and I says, "Well, how much is this going to cost me?" And they said, "Well, the dues are $12 a year." I said, "I don't have my checkbook with me. If you follow me home, I'll give you a check." And I became a member of the Grandview Farm Bureau unit. We handled everything in the county. We had county boards. I became a member of the County Farm Bureau Board of Directors. We tried to work with county government on issues that affected our industry because there were many national government regulations being developed and promulgated that were not good for agriculture. When you planted corn and you had a wireworm problem, them little devils would eat a hole in the kernel and it would die. Western Farmers Association was a co-op I belonged to. For $7.50 an acre, this chemical they would spray on the ground, and I would follow behind and incorporate it in the ground before I planted would control wireworms. EPA, for whatever reason, decided it was a hazard. So they had a meeting in Yakima to announce they were banning it. As a good Farm Bureau member and an interested farmer, I went to the meeting. And we got nowhere. After the meeting, I cornered an EPA official. I said, "What do you know about this chemical?" He says, "Nothing." I said, "Are you aware that it only has a shelf life in the soil of 6 weeks?" "No." "Are you aware that a corn plant does not pick it up?" "No." "Well, what are you aware of?" "Well, not much of anything." I said, "Why are you banning it?" So we had to go to a different chemical that cost more money. And then the movement came to, it was decided we needed a presence in Olympia that would be more effective in addressing issues that came up affecting agriculture. I'm not a big fan anymore of the news media. When I was county president and on into when I was state president, I learned who I could trust and who I couldn't. Some of the media over there weren't above sticking it to agriculture. And you had to be careful what you said. And I tried to keep agriculture in front of people because it's the basis of the valley. It's the basis of the state of Washington. I wasn't the important thing. The important thing was to get Farm Bureau's views and interest addressed. In 1984, in April, I was invited to meet President Reagan at Weyerhaeuser corporate headquarters. I was one of 42 people. I was the only farmer. 90 days later, I was at a State Farm Bureau President's meeting in Washington, D.C. We just got a call from the White House. The President has invited all of us that want to come over to the White House. So we went. We had our picture taken in the Oval Office with Reagan and the Secretary of Agriculture. Those are official White House photographs. I'd have to say it was the highlight of my service. Farm Bureau has a reason to exist. They have continued to serve agriculture. And I believe Farm Bureau, in the overall picture, has done a better job of representing agriculture than any other group.
Well, my wife and I had been married a year, so it's 1974. And the county president here in Whitman County, a man by the name of Marcus Stickle, and his wife Rita came to visit us over in the other house. It's in the background here. Anyway, and he was the county president of the Whitman County Farm Bureau. I knew about Farm Bureau. My dad had always belonged, but had never been active. Anyway, and they asked me if I'd be interested in joining the Farm Bureau and becoming the county young farmer and rancher chair, which they didn't have anybody at that point in time. So I decided, well, we would do that. So within 6 weeks, I had joined Farm Bureau, became the county young farmer and rancher chair, went to my first board meeting as a county chair, went to my first county Farm Bureau annual meeting, and then went to my first state convention. And that all happened within 6 weeks' time. And I walked out of the convention after 6 weeks of being a member of the Farm Bureau, discovering myself on the state Young Farmer and Ranchers Committee, and being told by President Bob Stumiller that I would be coming to the convention the next year to be the parliamentarian. So I guess you could say it kind of started in a whirl. Farm Bureau has evolved dramatically. First of all, of course, the most obvious thing is membership. We are the one farm organization in the state that can brag about how our membership has continually grown to this point, very dramatically, frankly, because when I joined, I believe the number was somewhere around 3,000 members when I joined Farm Bureau. And what are we today? 46,000 members. One of our favorite programs was what we called the 5-minute Farm Bureau. And what I would go out and ask our members to do is give me 5 minutes per week. That's all I need. That adds up to 20 minutes in a month. If you take 5 minutes per week, you can make phone call, you can write a quick letter to a congressman or a representative, and think about how much difference it would make if every member of Farm Bureau would give 5 minutes per week. First off, understand that I was elected in 1994. That's the same year that the Republicans had great gains in Washington, D.C. in particular, which simply meant that we had very friendly ears to go talk to, you know. And my own personal congressman was George Nethercutt. And George and I happened to hit it off pretty well, but there was a couple of issues that I worked through George that I guess I have to pin as top issues. Right off the bat, probably the first summer that I was president, I was contacted by Chris Hesse from Grant County. I'd known Chris for quite some time, not well, but just knew who he was. And he came to me one day and he says, "We've got a real problem out here in Grant County." And, well, what is that? Well, the potato growers out here, the IRS is trying to charge them on contracts, you know, that were future contracts for raising spuds. And I said, "Oh, that sounds like a potato grower issue." And Chris says, no. Have you ever forward contracted any wheat to come to me directly as a wheat farmer? I said, "Well, of course." He says, "Well, it would apply to you too." I says, "Well, we can't have that." Anyhow, so it just happened that within the next couple of weeks, I was headed for Washington, D.C. for what was called the Council of Presidents, which is when all the state presidents come into Washington, D.C. in July. The long and the short of it, it became the #1 issue of the American Farm Bureau that week. And I went up on the Hill that week and saw Congressman Nethercutt and said, George, this is what's going on here to some of your farmers. Can we do something about it? Well, that isn't right, he said. Let's see what we can do. And we started working that issue, and you know, it's one of the quickest things I ever saw happen in Washington, D.C. Within about 4 months, suddenly the issue was solved. Washington Farm Bureau and American Farm Bureau have always been aggressive at embracing, for instance, the young farmers and ranchers, recognizing that there is generational change all the time. They've embraced technology, and you know, the hard part right now, and of course it's always been kind of this way, is how does that young person get that start? You know, you've got to connect somehow with an established farmer. The most common, most obvious is with some kind of relative. But on the other hand, there needs to be more effort to find those people who don't have a relative to pass their farm on to and convince them that some young person is somebody they should help mentor into the business. So there will always be a place for farmers. They may not look quite the same and sound quite the same as I do, hopefully, but there will always be farmers. And they will always need some kind of an organization to represent them.
The 1990s is known as the time of tremendous growth in the membership of Washington Farm Bureau. Membership numbers increased from approximately 5,500 members to over 30,000 in that decade, which established all-time historic growth numbers. This growth followed a partnership developed with Country Financial, offering a new membership class, associate members. Member service programs grew as well. The Retro Safety Program, healthcare, and a Farm Bureau service company were created, which led to the addition of new staff in order to meet the demands for an ever-growing membership base. A new Farm Bureau radio network was established, plus a political action committee was formed in order to increase the voice and influence of the organization. At the turn of the century, the Washington Farm Bureau has continued to thrive. Increasing the voice of member families at the local, state, and federal level has remained an essential priority of the organization. Today, a farmer feeds 156 people. They are providing more food with less resources than ever before. Increasing member involvement at all levels of policy and empowering every member to share their story has become cornerstones of the organization. The Washington Farm Bureau Healthcare Trust Association Health Plan was endorsed by Washington Farm Bureau in 2004. In an ever-growing battle to advocate for agriculture, the Washington Farm Bureau continues to equip members with the tools necessary to ensure their livelihood remains viable, safe, and profitable. Membership and policy specialists were added to the Farm Bureau team to increase member engagement. Safety and claims programs continue to serve as a leading agriculture safety division in Washington State. Farm Bureau Solutions was launched in 2017 as a premier human resources educational program. The WFB-A team was launched in 2020 to increase legislative and communication education for volunteer leaders. It is easy to see why Washington Farm Bureau has earned the right to be called the voice of agriculture. Since day one, our members have been fighting for the rights of farmers and ranchers. We were created to give a voice to rural Washington, and through hard work, we have achieved great things. From pushing back on overregulation of areas such as the environment, land use, water rights, or labor, we have proven that united we can protect our industry and way of life. During the next 100 years, our role will be just as necessary to ensure that our family farms and ranches continue to feed the world.